Imagine waking up one morning, you pour your coffee, you check the news, and you realize that a massive multinational corporation like, I don't know, a giant tech monopoly or a global logistics firm has just suddenly absorbed the IRS.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a terrifying thought.
Right, and they're now fully in charge of assessing and collecting all the taxes in your country.
Hmm.
But the truly surreal part of this whole scenario is that they are actively pretending they haven't done it.
Right, they're playing dumb.
Exactly, like they're funding local law enforcement, they're cutting checks to regional politicians, but officially, on paper, they just insist they're a humble business operating under the laws of the land.
I mean, it reads like some kind of cyberpunk dystopia. But we're actually talking about a meticulously documented period of human history today.
Yeah, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we are unpacking a really dense but just fascinating historical document,
Yeah, it's the 1812 Fifth Report on the Affairs of the East India Company.
which details precisely this wild scenario playing out in 1760s Bengal. This document is fundamentally it's a forensic accounting of what happens when a group of British merchants accidentally on purpose becomes a sovereign government.
Right, and it's a total disaster.
It really is. We're diving into this massive collision of incentives because on one hand, you have the fiduciary duty of a corporation, right? Maximize short-term shareholder extraction.
Yeah, get the profits up for the next quarter.
Exactly. But on the other hand, you suddenly have the immense generational responsibility of governing millions of human beings.
And those two things do not mix well.
No, they do not. And to understand how catastrophic this collision was, we kind of have to look at the East India Company's initial transition. So in the 1760s, they are pivoting from just, buying and selling textiles to actually commanding armies and controlling territory.
But they approach ruling an entire country with the mindset of, like, mid-level accountants.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. And it becomes glaringly obvious during their sort of initial trial run in land management. Before the East India Company, or the EIC as we'll call them, before they absorbed the entire region, they acquired administrative control over 3 specific districts.
Right, Burdwan, Midnapur, and Chittagong.
Exactly. The sources refer to these as the ceded lands. And their immediate instinct, because they're a corporation, was to apply a purely commercial, free market mechanism to this deeply complex, centuries-old agricultural society.
Right, they implemented what they called the farming system.
Yeah, through a mechanism known as the outcry.
Okay, so the outcry, this was essentially a public auction, right? Like for the rights to collect land revenue.
Yes. They basically just put tax collection up for bid.
And the EIC assumed that, throwing these tax collection rights onto the open market would naturally reveal the true maximum yield of the land because, competitive bidding.
Right. They thought the free market would solve everything. But the fatal flaw in that logic was a complete, just total misunderstanding of the existing ecosystem.
Because they just ignored the people who were already doing it.
Exactly. Traditionally, these lands were managed by zamindars.
Zamindars. Okay, who were they exactly?
So zamindars were hereditary landlords, and they were deeply, deeply embedded in the social fabric. A zamindar wasn't just some random rent collector. They were a buffer against agricultural volatility.
What do you mean by buffer? Like financially?
Financially and socially. They knew the local farmers, who were called the ryots. They knew the soil capacity. They knew the weather patterns. If the monsoon failed, the zamindar absorbed the shock.
Oh, so they'd issue loans or maybe delay tax collection?
Exactly. So the ryots wouldn't starve because the zamindar needed them to be alive to plant the next year's crop,
Yeah.
right? It was a long-term relationship.
But this new outcry system, the auction, it just completely bypasses all that institutional knowledge.
It throws it right out the window.
So the zamindars are just getting outbid at these public auctions by outside speculators.
Yeah, people with cash but no ties to the land. The EIC governor at the time, Harry Verelst, he actually noted this in the records. He described the winning bidders as rapacious wretches.
Wow. Rapacious wretches. That's quite a formal complaint.
Right. I mean, these were people with capital but zero connection to the local agrarian reality.
It operates a lot like a modern private equity firm, like when they execute a hostile takeover of a legacy manufacturing business.
Well, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, like they don't buy the company to build better products. They buy it to liquidate the pension fund, sell off the physical real estate, leverage the brand with massive debt.
So just walk away right before the whole thing goes bankrupt.
Exactly. It's like predatory house fighting, but applied to an entire province. The speculators at these outcries did the agrarian equivalent of that. They drained the local wealth, ruined the soil, and then when the inevitable collapse happened, they simply abandoned their contracts.
Leaving the EIC with these massive, unexpected deficits.
Because they couldn't actually collect what they bid.
No, of course not. The mechanism of the auction structurally guaranteed that outcome. The EIC thought they were achieving, efficient price discovery, but they were actually incentivizing total systemic destruction.
So it's a massive failure. But incredibly, rather than realizing that a corporate model can't just seamlessly replace a sovereign social contract, the company they double down.
Yeah, they go even bigger, because an even larger prize becomes available.
Right. So we move to 1765. The EIC's chief military and political architect, Lord Clive, he secures the Diwani from the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam.
And the Diwani is the ultimate administrative prize. It's the official imperial right to collect the revenues of this massive region, Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa.
But Clive doesn't run up the British flag, does he?
No, he doesn't. He architects what historians call the dual system. And the financial asymmetry detailed in the fifth report about this system is just staggering.
Break down the numbers for us, because it's wild.
Okay, so the EIC agrees to pay the emperor 26 lakhs of rupees annually. And they allocate 53 lakhs a year to the local regional ruler, the Nawab. And what about the rest?
The EIC just absorbs the entirety of the remaining provincial wealth, all of it.
Just astronomical amounts of money. And the division of actual labor and responsibility in this dual system is even more extreme than the financial split, right?
Oh, totally. The Nawab is basically operating on a fixed corporate allowance, but he's burdened with the entire apparatus of civil society.
Right, he has to actually govern.
Yes. He has to administer justice, maintain the courts, keep public order among millions of people, while the EIC, meanwhile, holds the entire revenue stream and commands the dominant military force in the region.
Okay, wait. I have to push back here, or at least ask the obvious question.
Here, go for it.
If the EIC has a monopoly on force, right? They have the army, and they have the checkbook. Maintaining this puppet ruler just seems like an unnecessary administrative bottleneck. Like, why bother with the charade? Why not just plant their flag and take over completely?
It's a great question. And the strategic reason was basically liability protection on a geopolitical scale.
Liability protection. Okay, explain that. So, Lord Clive's own correspondence in the fifth report explicitly refers to the Nawab's authority as a mask. He also calls it a shadow. The EIC required this mask to navigate two massive external threats.
What was the first one?
The first was international law. If the EIC declared sovereign control, European rivals operating in India, like the French and the Dutch, they could treat it as an act of war by the British state.
Oh, I see. So the mask of the Nawab forced those rivals to treat the EIC as merely another commercial tenant of the local government.
Exactly. They're using the local government as a geopolitical shell company.
That is so sneaky. The Nawab absorbs all the diplomatic and legal risk, while the EIC is just quietly funneling the profits out the back door.
Precisely. But the second threat they were shielding themselves against was actually their own government back home.
The British Parliament.
Yes. Parliament in London was watching this immense wealth accumulation with deep, deep suspicion.
Because they're getting too powerful.
Right. If a private corporation suddenly declared itself the sovereign ruler of a territory that was larger and wealthier than Great Britain itself,
Parliament would freak out.
they'd immediately intervene. They'd regulate them, tax them, or probably just nationalize them entirely. So by maintaining the fiction that they were simply merchants operating under the Nawab's legal framework, the EIC maintained their corporate autonomy.
It is a brilliant piece of regulatory capture. I mean, purely from a corporate strategy perspective, it's genius.
It is.
But severing immense power from any form of public accountability creates a vacuum. And the people of Bengal were the ones who were pulled into it.
Yeah, the human cost was just unimaginable.
And the fallout of this dual system is documented in this blistering 1769 letter written by a guy named Richard Beecher.
And we should note, Beecher isn't some outside critic or activist.
Right. He's an EIC official stationed in Bengal. He is part of the corporate machinery, reporting up the chain of command.
Which makes his words hit even harder.
Yeah. He writes, quote, "It must give pain to an Englishman to have reason to think that since the accession to the Diwani, the condition of the people of this country has been worse than it was before."
He's providing a macroeconomic post-mortem of the EIC's shadow rule. He even goes so far as to compare the company's administration unfavorably to the previous era of Nawab Aliverdi Khan.
Right. And he acknowledges that the old regime was, arbitrary and authoritarian.
Definitely. But And this is key. Aliverdi Khan operated under the fundamental logic of sovereign wealth. He protected the riots, the farmers, because a prosperous agricultural base was the literal source of his own power.
Exactly. A sovereign has a vested interest in the long-term health of the tax base. You don't want your taxpayers starving.
Right. But under the EIC's mask, the actual collection of revenue was outsourced to these native managers called almils.
And these almils were basically given strict, aggressive financial quotas by the EIC, right?
Yes, they operated a lot like the speculators in the outcry system. They were temporary contractors. They had no permanent stake in the land.
So they're motivated entirely by meeting the company's short-term demands just to secure their own commissions. It's like a corporate board bringing in a ruthless interim CEO.
Oh, that's exactly what it's like.
You know, his only mandate is to juice this quarter's numbers to trigger a massive bonus, completely ignoring that he is bankrupting the company for next year.
Yep. And the systemic destruction wasn't just a matter of cruel taxation either. Beecher identifies this structural macroeconomic drain that is just fascinating in its devastation.
You're talking about the silver.
Yeah, the aggressive extraction of specie hard silver currency.
How did that work? Because it wasn't just that they were taxing people, right? It changed the flow of money.
Right. Under the old Nawabs, heavy taxes were collected, yes. But that silver was then spent locally on armies, courts, infrastructure, palaces.
So the currency circulated back into the regional economy?
Exactly, allowing trade to continue. The EIC broke that cycle completely.
Because they collected the land revenue in silver, but instead of spending it back into the local economy, they used that silver to purchase Bengal's manufactured goods.
Primarily textiles.
And then they shipped those goods to Europe to be sold for profit. So the silver was just permanently exiting the regional economy.
It was a massive extraction of wealth.
Which creates a catastrophic deflationary spiral. Because think about it, if you're a riot and you actually manage to grow a surplus crop, you can't sell it because there's literally no physical currency left in the local markets for anyone to buy it with.
Right. And if you can't sell your crop, you can't acquire the silver you need to pay the UIC's taxes.
It's a trap, a completely engineered economic vacuum.
And that forces the local managers, the almils, to literally seize the seed grain and the farming tools just to hit their EIC quotas.
Which guarantees there will be no crop at all the following year.
Exactly. And the result of this was mass desertion. The riots. Facing unpayable demands and systemic starvation, they abandoned the heavily cultivated plains and fled into the jungles.
The entire agrarian foundation of Bengal was just crumbling under the weight of an extractive corporate model.
Which brings us to this critical pivot point in the document.
Right. The EIC realizes they're killing the golden goose.
Yeah, as vast tracts of land go uncultivated and the revenue streams begin to dry up, actual panic sets in among the corporate leadership.
Figures like Harry Verelst, who succeeds Clive as governor, and Richard Beecher, they realize that acting purely as extractors just isn't viable anymore.
No. To protect their bottom line, they actually have to start governing.
We see this grudging transition from merchants to administrator.
Yeah. And one of the first major systemic changes they push for is the implementation of multi-year leases for land management. They wanted to move away from those disastrous annual outcries.
Right. They start advocating for leases of at least 3 years.
Because the logic there shifts the incentive structure entirely.
It really does. I mean, if a land manager only holds a 1-year contract, any capital investment they make, like, say, repairing a vital irrigation canal or clearing overgrown wasteland, it's a net loss.
Because they won't hold a contract long enough to see the increased yield from that canal.
Exactly. But a 3-year lease alters the time horizon of capital allocation. If you know you control the land for multiple seasons, investing in that irrigation canal suddenly makes financial sense.
Because you will capture the increased agricultural output in years 2 and 3.
It is a desperate attempt by the EIC to reintroduce the concept of the future into an economy they had basically stripped down to the present tense.
That's a great way to put it. And alongside these longer leases, the sources highlight a major logistical shift in 1769 with the deployment of English supervisors.
Supervisors.
Yeah, supervisors. The EIC actually sends its own men directly into the districts.
And what's their job?
Their mandate is to investigate the local histories of the land, oversee the complex revenue collections, and actually look into the functioning of the local courts.
So they are, for the first time, trying to map the machinery of the society they took over.
Exactly. And this deployment really signifies the operational death of the mask.
Because the EIC could no longer pretend the Nawab was handling all the complexities of civil society while they simply collected a check.
Right. To keep the silver flowing, the company had to understand local languages, they had to navigate centuries-old property laws, and mediate regional disputes.
They were forced to build a massive civil bureaucracy.
Yes.
But let's be very clear about the nature of this shift, though. I want to make sure you, listening, don't get the wrong idea. Reading the accounts of Verelst and Beecher, it would be a huge mistake to frame this transition as some kind of, humanitarian awakening.
Oh, absolutely not. The EIC didn't suddenly discover corporate social responsibility?
The fifth report leaves no room for that illusion.
No. The reforms were driven by pure, unadulterated supply chain management. The EIC's internal correspondence is just filled with anxiety about plummeting revenues in deserted fields.
Because you cannot extract taxes from a starved population.
And you cannot demand silver from a farmer who has abandoned his land and fled into the jungle.
Right. The realization that you cannot endlessly extract from a system without reinvesting in its foundation, that was an incredibly expensive pragmatic lesson for the company.
It really was. The foundations of the British civil administration in India were laid not out of a desire to govern well, but out of a desperate need to stabilize a failing commercial enterprise.
It's just wild. We have tracked a staggering evolution today. We started with the EIC acting like predatory private equity firms in the ceded lands, right? Running short-term auctions that structurally guaranteed the ruin of the agricultural base.
And then we watched them scale up, taking control of an entire empire's worth of revenue while hiding behind the Nawab's mask.
Intentionally divorcing their supreme power from any legal or social accountability.
Only to watch that system completely implode under the weight of its own extractive logic. The macroeconomic drain of silver destroyed the very markets the EIC relied on,
forcing a reluctant corporation to slowly, painfully construct a government just to protect its own investments.
It is a definitive historical proof that a corporation cannot seamlessly override a sovereign social contract without creating immense friction.
And that friction is exactly why this dense 1812 document matters so much to you listening today. Because the architecture of power changes, sure, but the underlying incentives of capital rarely do.
So true. The East India Company sought the absolute authority of a sovereign, combined with the limited liability and sole fiduciary focus of a merchant.
It is a masterclass in the dangers of operating immense power behind a mask.
The historical specifics belong to the 18th century, obviously, but the tension between corporate extraction and public welfare is a permanent feature of modern systems.
Oh, without a doubt.
Whenever you have an entity that controls vital infrastructure or vast resources, but is primarily accountable only to its shareholders, you risk a replication of this exact dynamic.
Which leaves you with a really critical lens to apply to the world around us right now. We just spent a lot of time analyzing a mercantile corporation that took on sovereign powers, causing systemic chaos because they prioritized shareholder returns over the welfare of the citizens they effectively ruled.
Right.
Well, look at the landscape of today's massive multinational tech monopolies. These are entities that effectively govern our digital public squares.
Yeah, they control the algorithms that dictate how we communicate.
How our businesses reach customers, how we access information. They act as sovereign regulators of the digital realm, extracting immense value from our data to fuel their quarterly returns.
It's a very similar dynamic, structurally speaking.
Exactly. So the question is, where is their mask? And as they optimize their platforms for extraction, well, who are their riots?
Oof. That is a profound structural question. The technology may be new, but the danger of unaccountable power is as old as the archives themselves.
The ledger might be digital now, but the math is just as ruthless. Thanks for diving in with us.